I'm Christopher Hein. Today with me is Sensei Guillaume Erard. Did I say your name correctly?
Almost, Guillaume.
Erard. Actually, I'm going to let you tell everyone where you come at in Aikido and Daitoryu.
So I've started Aikido when I was in my teens, 15 or so. Had done judo, like many French people of my generation. You would have done judo or soccer, and I was just not good enough at soccer, so I chose judo. Did that for some years. I think I went to EQ, and then got a bit tired with competition. And then went into Aikido. Mainly for two reasons. One is that absence of competition, which was quite appealing to me because I had already done so much of it in judo, and I had done water polo as well. I don't know if you
oh yeah, we have it. Yeah,
but, right. Okay. And so lots of competition here as well. So that was a good time for me to switch. I was in that sort of head state. And the fact that Aikido relative to judo and karate was less well known, so there was that sort of mystery thing associated to it, the hakama and all that. So that sounded great. So that's what I started. Done that in a few countries. France. I lived in England, in Ireland. Then decided to move to Japan, and it's when I first arrived in Japan that I got the opportunity to practice Daitoryu for the first time. Found it quite interesting. Didn't necessarily intend to continue, but I was kind of encouraged by my senpai, whose name is Olivier Gorin, who's somebody who's been in Japan for a long time, and he's really pushed me to continue, and I have continued ever since. And that's, yes, probably now 14 years. So starting Aikido at 15, 14 years of Daitoryu. So I'm at a stage where both those disciplines are as much part of my identity, I guess, at this stage. And I find this interesting because I think this is really what ideally it should be. What you do should be part of you. It shouldn't be you. So in other words, if for whatever reason you have to stop Aikido because you get injured, it should not destroy you personally, right? Because this is not who you are, but it's right. Really a part of you. And you could allocate that time and energy to something else, which if it happened to me, I have so many things I like to do that wouldn't be a problem. But it's part of me, and it's important in the sense of make that live through your technique, through when you're on the mat. Weapons is a good example. When you take your fork and you eat, that fork is part of you. You don't think of the technique of eating your meal with your fork. You just pick up the fork, and it could be your fork from home, but it could be the fork at the cafeteria, and it wouldn't matter, will it? So weapons is the same thing for me. It's just part of you, something that you know so intimately that you don't even think about it. And likewise, empty-handed technique is sometimes they're dissociated from that sort of feeling. We kind of recognize that in weapons, but I think empty-handed techniques are like that as well. And every new partner is just a different fork when you go to the restaurant. So yeah, just to say that, yeah, at that stage, when I say it's part of me, I'm not making a big claim saying that I know so much that, yeah, this is mine. No, I'm saying that, I'm comfortable in doing this enough.
Right.
So yeah, that's about it for the
okay.
summer,
Sounds great. One of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you was I'd read several of your articles and over years, first you were just the guy with the complicated name that I didn't know how to say, and then I was like, oh, I keep seeing that guy's stuff coming up, and I read more things that I liked from you. And one of the things I like about you is you have a lot of humility and understanding of what you don't know and acceptance of what you don't know. And I feel like in Aikido right now, we're full of so many masters. There's so many people who know everything about Aikido, and they want to tell you exactly how it is. And you don't have a small resume. You have a nice resume of what you've done, but in that you're not saying like, oh, I'm the actual expert. And if you really saw the masters, then you would know, like I know, the real truth. Like you have a very open viewpoint, and I appreciate that. And so I think it's nice to talk with people who clearly are experts in Aikido and the areas around Aikido, yet they recognize that they don't know everything, right? And I appreciate that about you. And one of the articles I read that you had put together was a translation actually of an old interview that Ueshiba had done in a magazine. And it was this really kind of contentious, interesting article. And I had read some other stuff around that. And you did not seem to like cherry pick it and make it seem like you were trying to cast a specific light on it, but you were giving a very open translation, I thought. And it allowed me as the reader to kind of take away what I would instead of what you thought I should take away. And I appreciated that a lot about you. And so one of the questions I kind of want to ask you is, Aikido is so diverse and so strange and different for different people. And you could do Aikido in one school and then do it in another, and they're completely different things, it seems like. What do you feel is the thread that ties all of that together? What makes Aikido Aikido?
Just before answering this, I'll just pick up on what you said about that translation, and linking to what you said before. It's not necessarily because I put something out that I understand it fully. And likewise, on the subject of translation, that's an important point to make, I think. When I pick up a document and I translate it, it is translated with my own limitations. And there are many parts, to be perfectly honest with you, that I'm iffy about, especially, of course, on that particular intro. So only to translate, not literally, but to translate intelligibly what is written can be challenging, let alone telling you what Sensei might have meant when he said that. Right. And I think this is what's crucial, is that, yes, I mean, anybody who's better at Japanese than me will pick problems with the translation that I do, for sure. And that's why, and Japanese is such a horrible language for that, because there's numerous elements that come into play. Not necessarily only literal translation, but also the context. Whether or not a person, when you translate their words, is going to affect your translation. I have, and I've openly admitted this, even when I interview Japanese instructors, especially those who I know well, they may be saying something in Japanese. I'm going to translate it slightly different because I know what they mean. Right. And so, but as long as you're honest in saying that this is what you do, I think that's all right. And I think as long as, I mean, I'm trying to be truthful in the way that I try to pass on what's being said. Is it the most accurate? I'm not sure. And this is why most of the time, when I can, I put the original Japanese alongside so that people actually can check and correct me if need be. Right. I'm actually surprised, to be honest with you, that I'm not corrected more often. I should be, really, to be honest. I should be. I'm making way more mistakes than that. So is it a question of interest? I mean, a lot of people who've got the skills don't necessarily have the time and so on. But at least it's out there and it's subject to review. And this is something that we are doing with Stan's work. Stan has done so much work, but nowadays we know a few things more. We can go back to the text, and there's a back and forth between me and Josh Gold constantly, because sometimes we find stuff and it doesn't negate what Stan did, but it puts more information. It corrects a few things, and that's the way it should be. I mean, that comes from my background in research, scientific research. There's never, it doesn't matter who says it. It's what's being said, and is there evidence to back it up? And that's basically my approach. As far as your actual question, excuse me, as to what should Aikido be? I mean, you can go through what Sensei is supposed to have said and written through the years until your eyeballs bleed, and not really necessarily find a satisfying answer. After all these years looking into it, what I can tell you is I think he just probably didn't really mind what would happen afterwards. Because if we just look at his life and at the various things that people did in his school, I can't recall any incidents of him telling you are not doing it right, stop doing that, or you'll become Hamon, you'll be kicked out. That would happen very easily in so-called traditional schools. but that did not happen in Aikido. Neither did he actually filter in the people who came. You know, this was okay, anybody can come, and he didn't kick out anyone. So I think if you just look at that, which is, I think, undeniable, regardless of what he might have written and said, it's what he did, that leaves a lot of wiggle room, I think. For me, Aikido being like part of that big family of Budo, it is by nature something that's going to have to change, to evolve, to fit the time, to fit the needs. Now, where are the boundaries, either technically or philosophically? That's the actual question. This is partly why I went to study Daitoryu. I didn't study Daitoryu because I wanted to, well, yes, of course, at the beginning, you want to know the real way to do Kotegaeshi, you want to know the real way to do Shihonage. But then you found out that there's so many ways to do, even within Daitoryu school, which is not that monolithic thing. There are many ways to do. I mean, my own school, we do things very differently compared to what you guys see in Daitoryu in the more, I would say, widely available DVDs and stuff like that. But at least first, it opens your mind towards the fact that there are indeed many ways to do things, even in Daitoryu. So immediately you change your point of view in thinking whether somebody from that school or that school does something wrong to you. It's not necessarily wrong, it's just we've done differently. And if you've studied enough and if you know enough and you've got the technical keys, vocabulary, to see what I call points in the technique. I don't use principle. I think it's a dodgy word. It's too wide. It's like keys. It doesn't mean anything. But the points in the technique, if you can see the points in somebody's technique, even if it's not the way you do it in the kata in your school, you say, oh yeah, they are putting in action those points and that makes sense. And perhaps that's not my choice, but at least I can see where that's coming from and why they're doing it. That developing that intelligence, that ability to read other people's technique, and immediately what follows is tolerance, because first you admit that you don't know everything, and then you can see the qualities rather than the difference in other people's technique. Now, what the human brain does, it looks at contrast, and so it looks at differences to make sense of the world. Unfortunately, that often is linked, and I don't know. I mean, the neural pathways associated with this are probably really interesting. Looking at contrast sometimes associated to judgment and possibly negative emotions. That's very interesting, something about the human brain. But if you've got enough knowledge, you no longer associate that necessarily with those negative emotions, and you see merit instead, which is why that essential literacy is so important. And I encourage anyone to, not necessarily to pick up Daitoryu. I'm not here to say that everybody should do Daitoryu, but at least go and cross-train, and certainly different schools of Aikido, different teachers. I'm just amazed. I'm just back from Europe after a series of seminars, and I'm just amazed that nowadays Aikido is still so segmented, and people still don't, there's a seminar of whoever, it doesn't matter, just down the road, and they won't go.
Because of their bias.
Yeah, I don't know what's, is it fear? Is it fear of the unknown? Is it fear of differences? Something that you practice a technique, you go in a school, and that feeling of this way the technique is done, like, hurts you almost in your identity or in your conception of what it should be. And I think until you learn to let go of that, so the only way to do that is to do it more rather than less, right?
Right.
And anybody who's done that seriously enough and cross-trained enough has understood that. But there are still a lot of people who are somehow hurt, and I use the word hurt purposefully, and I do mean that they probably feel negatively about this, and because it's not pleasant, they don't want to do it. We have to find a way to make them feel positively about this. So inviting each other and so on. I mean, here in Japan, I try to do that. For example, I've got a very good relationship with Jacques Payet in Kyoto, who's a very, very, very prominent Yoshinkan instructor, an Uchideshi of Shioda Gozo, and trying to establish those bridges, and we communicate, but also he got me to come over to Kyoto, and I would like to develop more collaborations with him. I think this is essential for the art, but still that doesn't tell you what Aikido should be. What I'm sure of, the product of what I've been doing in Daitoru and Aikido. Now, when I step on the mat and I do something, I can explain to you rationally everything I'm doing.
Right. Excellent.
And that's the only thing. If a hand comes up during a seminar or a class and somebody asks me, why are you doing this? I can tell you. And I feel this is the essential thing that a teacher needs to be able to do. Do what you say and say what you do. In other words, technically, you must be able to explain and justify everything you do. Now, you may change. I mean, during my seminar, I'm gonna move the cursor from what you call like new Aikido, dynamic Aikido, to more older technique, and I'm gonna keep changing the cursor depending on who I've got in front of me, what I want to teach on that day. But it's always the purpose, the product of a choice. I have chosen to put the cursor here in that circumstances. Right. And that's the way it should be. Now, whether your range is like this or like this, well, it depends on how much training you've done. But within that range, you should be free to do that. Because if you only do something, not because you choose to do it, but because you haven't studied the rest, then this is not a choice. It's a product of a limitation. So for me, it's potential, knowing as much as possible, and then I can choose where I put the cursor. And again, as I explained just before, it also allows me to see the qualities in other people's Aikido, and that changes your life as well. This is great. So that's what Aikido is to me. Then, knowing the historical technique, I can also say, and again, you have to take that with a pinch of salt, because not all the Daitoru school necessarily use the same mechanics. But I can tell you, when something goes against an essential aspect, mechanical aspect of what Daitoru, the way Daitoru works, I can also see it. So I can tell you're making that up, because this is not really fitting within the way it's done. There are so many ways to do in other martial arts, which are not. It's not a negative judgment. I'm not saying that it doesn't work or whatever. It's not the point. Just this is not how Daitoru works as a whole. So I guess that's a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think it's a really complex question, and I appreciate the way you're answering it, which is not just giving a direct, this is what it is. It is Kotegaishin, Shionage, and Sugiyashi, like whatever ideas you have, but it's a complicated answer. And I think that's the problem, is for most people in the West and in the internet culture, like they want an answer that they can grab a hold of and then tell everyone else, well, this is what Aikido is. This expert told me, and now I know what Aikido is. And so we can write that off. And it's just not that way. And for myself, the more I've studied Aikido, the more enigmatic it's become to me, right? Because I realize, like, well, at the top, these people are both as legitimate, and they have different ideas about what this thing must be. So it's not a matter of legitimacy, it's a matter of why are you making these choices? And earlier, what you said about, you think the most important thing for a teacher is to be able to explain why they're doing it that way. That's how I would like to see the consciousness of Aikido shift. So it's like, it doesn't matter what you do so much, in that you can explain why you're making those choices. And so, I have this way of saying, like, so, and we talked about this in an email, and it's my own pet thing, but to say that Aikido zeitgeist, right? Like, what is the spirit of Aikido? And to me, it's kind of this amorphous thing that, like, there's a feeling about what Aikido is. Maybe Aikido is a refuge for kids who were beat up a lot, or maybe Aikido is, something like that, that it's like, here's the thread that we all have in common, and here's how we're trying to look at martial arts from the lens that we all seem to have. We all seem to be these similar kinds of people, right? And it could be that amorphous, right? But I appreciate the way that you're going about answering this question, which is, I don't really know, but here's how I feel about it, and here's my expectations of other teachers.
In many ways, that sort of absence of competition in Aikido is a blessing, but it's also a curse, because unless, and I was lucky because I came from that, you come from an environment, very competitive environment, when you've had your, I can tell you in water polo, it was far more violent sometimes than the Kyokushin classes that I do. After the match in the shower, and bam. So once you've done the competition and you've struggled like this, you can tell that you decide to move away from this. otherwise, and this is why should people start Aikido early in life? I'm not quite sure, or certainly not Aikido only, because if you haven't known competition and struggle like this, perhaps you cannot really recognize it when it takes other forms. And then in Aikido, because we've got that weird grading system, that's a mystery to me as well. Like, why would you have that message of Aikido and still have a ranking system? What is the point? What benefit? I would be in favor of stripping it away, because this is where competition goes. Did you get your nidan before me, and
right.
do I feel that you deserve it, or do I deserve more than you? There is competition. Likewise, your position with the teacher. Did you take more ukemi than me, this week from the teacher? And what does it mean? Does it not like me anymore? Or,
right.
And so that it permeates in many aspects of Aikido. It's probably in many different other disciplines as well. It's not only Aikido, but we need to recognize when it's there. But this goes way beyond Aikido, but it's quite a destructive force, I think, in Aikido. We have to get rid of that and find out that it's a collaborative process, and it's a thing of self-growth. What does it matter, to be better than the other, and so on. And that's one of the relevance for me of Aikido. And in other words, what makes, in my opinion, Aikido is that it would be a wonderful tool, in my opinion, for society to help people realize that competition is really, in my opinion, a destructive force. Competition is built in our DNA at the most fundamental level as one of the components of evolution via natural selection.
Right.
We've always been done since the whole thing started. It's been competition from the beginning to the end. Perhaps now, as a species with a slightly more developed neocortex, it might be time to think along different lines. Because what's a winner? A winner is somebody who manufactures losers. So what is it telling you? And it's not my quote, okay? It's something from Albert Jacquard, a French scientist. But I really agree with that. Is it really the relationship that we want to have with each other? And you can apply that. Do you really need that competitive aspect in business, or could a business run without that sort of shark sort of mentality? The idea is about, is growth sustainable in an environment which is basically physically finite? Okay. The competition breaks down in those circumstances when resources are limited and so on, because it's a zero-sum game. What people win, the others will lose.
Right.
And I feel that Aikido could be a wonderful vector for this, and that's why I'm talking about Aikido. That's the Ueshiba thing, in my opinion. I can't see Takeda Sokaku being much concerned with those ideas. It's been suggested that he might have been, but I think that's wishful thinking. We don't really have evidence of that. So that, for me, that would be very, very important, and I think Aikido has a place for that. And also the other part of that, and that goes back to what you were saying about admitting our own limitations, is that doing other martial arts, you've done. I know that you've cross-trained in a number of things. Teachers screw up, especially when you do how do you say, free fight and stuff like that, and
Sparring, yeah.
Sparring, yeah. In Aikido, we don't have that opportunity. And I'm very suspicious of teachers who never make a mistake, because that doesn't happen, does it?
No.
The only way that happens is if you stack the chances and if you bias the game to your advantage. And this is what an Aikido seminar looks like most of the time. The teacher never makes a mistake. The teacher never fails. And they should. And sometimes I screw with people with that, like that. I was showing a way to develop a bit of power on Moro Tedori, and it's something that is really helpful to develop power. But there's a limit to that, and I was showing that in Britain just a few weeks ago, and I wanted to make a point that this is not a superpower. So, and I was very lucky. There was a wonderful gentleman, a bodybuilder, who had never done Aikido in his life. So he was not wearing kekogi, and he just turned up and he said, can I train? I said, of course you can. And then I called that guy, and then I tried to do it, and I can't do it. It's too strong.
Yeah.
It's not magic. There is a point where a technique is not gonna work. So first of all, the technique is absolutely not supposed to work on everybody, for sure. And there's a limit to physics.
Yes.
That guy obviously was way more powerful. Plus, he was smart about it. Okay, he knew how to redirect his body weight and so on, and that didn't work. You should have seen the shock on people's eyes
when the sensei failed.
Doesn't compute. And I've done that in France as well with a judo teacher, quite strong, but also very good at reorganizing his body and so on. And he just won't let you go down. But it's so funny to see the shock. Like, people can't seem to process that information. There's people who are gonna dismiss you. Oh, he doesn't know anything. He's failed. Oh, I'm gonna go back to my teacher who never fails. And you get the people who are like, what just happened? We need more of that.
Yes.
We need more of that. No technique is 100% efficient. Nothing works on everybody. And it's building that luck. I mean, this is why there are so many techniques in Daitoryu, for instance. This is why also Takeda Soka could never show the same technique twice, because he knew that the second time around, if he had somebody smart in front of him, they would realize, okay, learn to lose. We need to learn to lose. So, in other words, we have to stop competing, in my opinion, and start to be the best. What's this notion of best?
Right.
The best word. No, this is nonsense. But at the same time, we have to accept to lose. We have to learn to lose. Technically, psychologically, accept defeat. Defeat is part of life. There is not enough defeat, in my opinion, in Aikido. So I'm not, to be very clear, I'm not suggesting we should include competition in Aikido. I am not saying that. But we should include that notion of defeat, of failure. And it's not here enough. I mean, you play basketball, you're not gonna get it in the rim all the time. That's why you train. How come in Aikido we think somewhat differently about this? I don't know.
So do you think this is really the crux of the problem you're describing, where we are trying to have a martial art that's not about competition and trying to show there are ways other than competition, yet in the absence of competition, we expect like phenomenal results? A judo instructor, well, people know that they lost that championship or they did badly in that tournament. And so it's obvious, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we know he's still good judoka. But in Aikido, because we have the absence of competition, and in fact, what we're trying to do is teach non-competitiveness, there's this inherent problem that's happening all the time.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, in my opinion. It's the most beautiful thing about Aikido, but it's at the same time, this is the root of so many of its problems, which is why that honesty is absolutely necessary. And I'm not always seeing it. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people are very honest, but in other words, what are the claims of this and that teacher? If we say that Aikido should be diverse, okay, there are Aikido teachers who should be claiming things that I don't agree with, and I should be fine with it as long as they deliver on those. Question is, do they? And it goes both ways. Huh? If you claim that Aikido is that super efficient combat system, well, then show it.
Right.
But at the same time, if you say that Aikido is that education system to become a better person, well, show it.
Right.
Because I can tell you, there are many people who claim that Aikido is that ultimate self-defense system or whatever, and they wouldn't last a single second in the suburbs in Paris. And there's those people who claim that Aikido is an education system to make you a better human being, and they're dreadful human beings.
Right.
When you know them, they're awful in Japan and abroad. Some of the most prominent teachers who are into that kind of thing are absolutely not nice individuals. So are they doing what they're claiming to be doing? And they should be held accountable. But at the same time, my claims in Aikido, you shouldn't be accountable for my claims in Aikido.
Right.
I mean, if somebody comes to you and say, hey, Aikido is supposed to be this, and they tell you, but this is not what you said, this is something that I said, why would you be held accountable for that? You don't have to.
Right.
So in many ways, you know, there are many claims, but I don't feel accountable for those. But for sure, you know, if you pull something that I've said and you tell me, look, you know, are you actually doing what you said here? I might, one, have changed my mind, or I might indeed not be doing what I've said. And, you know, that should be highlighted for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. I really appreciate your candor and vulnerability. And I think in Aikido particularly, it's a hard thing to have because, as you said, when you show vulnerability in Aikido, everyone tends to go, oh, well, they just don't know the real secrets, you know?
Right,
so
exactly.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And it's nice to see someone who's come a long way in Aikido being able to have that. So I appreciate you quite a bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of very, very, very good teachers, some of the best in the world. So I think even though I myself may not be able to do many things, I probably have a good sense of what you can expect to achieve in one or the other sort of interpretation of Aikido. And I think if there is one thing I can, you know, I can claim from my background, is that I've seen a great deal of people high ranked in numerous disciplines. So I think I've got a sense of what potential there is, and you know, the benefit and the cost sometimes of doing this or that. I mean, I know that thing of you know, it's a very popular term the past 10 years of internal power. Internal power, everybody's on is about internal power, and it's good, but do I want to spend a seminar doing Aikido and doing this for 2 hours? No, it's not me. It's not me. Right. And you know, is spending all that time something that to develop those qualities, something that's really I find interesting as a whole? No, there's so many other aspects. You know, there's the zanshin, there's the mai, there's the timing, there's so many other aspects. I try to encompass all of it. And also, you have to look at the cost of something you do. I mean, it's really interesting that some of the practitioners which are the most talented in developing insane amount of, they refer to it as internal power. So I'll use it even though I don't really use the term myself. But you know, the physics is a bitch. If you generate power, insane amount of power, physics says so that some of it is going to go in whatever you're striking, but half of it is going to go back to you. Right. And a lot of people who are working along those lines don't necessarily consider that fact until they injure themselves. They don't get injured, okay? I got injured training. No, you injured yourself. You're generating so much energy that comes back to you, and you haven't really necessarily considered what to do with it, and you've damaged somewhere in your body. And I've seen that many, many times. You see that in weapons as well, because immediately with weapons, because you get additional weight and momentum to what you do, there's a lot of people who train like with the furibo, you know, the very heavy bokuto.
Subuto.
Subito, yeah, and so that can go up to 8 kilos, something ridiculous like this. What is it for? Well, precisely, this is not something that you use to develop power. It's an additional load that you have to learn to deal with internally with your body. And if you're not good at doing your suburi with a normal standard bokuto, and you find that at the end of your strike, there's always that little bit of tension at your back of your spine towards your hips, because you tend to compensate that extra momentum, times 100,000, 10,000 cuts, it will build up to inflammation and to damage. Now, pick up that thing which is now 8 kilos and do the same mistakes, you're not building internal power, you're crippling yourself.
Right.
And that's interestingly, I don't find that you see lots of articles about internal power and how to develop it and what you're supposed to do. There are pictures and stuff. Rarely do people actually mention the fact, what the heck do you do with that power once you've generated it? So that's one of the other things. And I see people cripple for that reason. I got injured practicing Aikido. No. Most of the time you injured yourself.
It's a nice distinction. Okay. Is there anything else? Mostly what I wanted to touch base with you, and I wanted to kind of expose my audience a little bit to your ideas. I really appreciate your translations and the work you're doing. And so if you have anything else you'd like to add, that would be great. Otherwise, I got the mainstay of what I wanted to talk about in this interview, although I'd like to maybe do some with you in the future. If you have time, that would be wonderful.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I realize that my answers are perhaps not very satisfying in the sense of actually answering, because I refrain precisely from giving a specific answer. Now, of course, when I teach or when I practice, I make choices. So if you like, I go down a path, very, very specific path. But that will depend on the circumstances. And which is, it's also what is nice to have that range. Sometimes I start a seminar and I've got the intent of going all dynamic and big falls, bim bam boom, bim bam boom, and I found that, oh, okay, the level of ukemi is not that good. It's nice to be able to shift when you've realized that, instead of being like, oh, what should I do?
6 hours of this.
Exactly. Like the seminar just started, it's a whole weekend and it's Saturday morning. What am I gonna do? So it's part of general culture. And I think Aikido culture is something which is necessary, which is why in my articles and my videos, when I interview somebody, when I can, I always try to put the context, the background, give some indications culturally, linguistically, so that people can understand who those people are about.